I always believed marriages don't explode suddenly. They leak quietly, and silently, day by day. The destruction comes later. The collapse begins first with small, invisible cuts. I married Aram at 28, when I was still comfortable believing that routine means security. We were the serious, predictable pair in the family. He worked corporate logistics. I handled design work from home. Everyone called us stable. People used to joke that we were the kind of couple who would grow old like two neighboring trees, separate roots, same soil. Except this soil dried without warning. Aram now travels 2 to 3 weeks every month. His voice is warmer to clients and managers than it is to me. He doesn't yell. He doesn't insult. He doesn't cheat. His neglect is not violent. It is worse. It is professional. He schedules his emotions like his meetings. He packs away his affection like his laptop charger. He gives me nothing to fight against. Nothing to fix. Only vacancy to stare at. And a woman can only negotiate with empty space for so long. Most days, my human contact is limited to delivery drivers and the whispering guilt of the neighbors' gossip when they see yet another week go by without him coming home. I told myself this loneliness was temporary, just a season of life. But a year passed, then another. Loneliness didn't leave. It settled. It built a home inside me. Then there is my nephew, Saad. 22. Final year of university. My sister's son. Ambitious. Polite. Too smart for his age. He drops by often, partly because university is close, partly because he sees me like a safe adult who listens without judging. He has a softness that reminds me of myself, before I hardened. He laughs easily. He asks questions enthusiastically. He sees people. I forgot how that feels. To be seen without tension. Without agenda. And I hate how grateful I feel when he simply sits with me and has tea, like the ordinary can still exist without effort. He will talk about his projects, his internships, his fear of graduating into a world that demands certainty from people who haven't even built their own certainty yet. Sometimes I pretend his voice fills the house like Aram's used to. I know how wrong that sentence sounds. I know, but the mind that starves does not think in straight lines. And I am starving, yet at this point, I was still behaving within the boundaries of morality. There was no forbidden intention in the air. There was only the slow ache of a woman who realizes she is invisible to the person she married. Sometimes the first betrayal isn't physical. It's emotional. It's the moment you realize you share more of your thoughts with someone else than you do with your spouse. I didn't know, back then, that this small shift would soon become the reason everything would crack open. And that someone unexpected would witness the worst version of me. The breaking point didn't appear like thunder. It arrived quietly, through a single evening that began like any other, routine, predictable, harmless. Aram had messaged me mid-afternoon that his flight was delayed another 2 days. No apology, simply an itinerary update, as if I was a hotel desk clerk who needed his schedule. I looked at the blue ticks on my phone and realized I was numb to the disappointment. I had run out of reactions. All that remained was a tired, hollow acceptance. Later that same evening, Saad stopped by. He said he had been presenting his semester project to his professor and he wanted to decompress before heading back home. We sat in the sunroom, the warm white light from the lamp filling the silence. He talked, and I listened more attentively than someone should listen to someone who isn't their partner. Then he paused, looked at me, and gently said, "You look exhausted. You carry everything alone, don't you?" No one had asked me about me in months. That single sentence cracked something inside my chest. I felt seen, and the feeling was dangerously addictive. I didn't immediately respond. I simply exhaled slowly, realizing that silence itself was an answer. He leaned back, resting his head on the cushion, watching me with sincere concern. Not curiosity, concern, and it was that nuance that made it 10 times more tempting. In his eyes, I wasn't a wife left behind. I was a person worth checking in on. I told him softly, "Sometimes, I don't know where my marriage is heading anymore." It was the first time I had spoken that thought aloud. He listened, no interruption, no judgment, just patience, the kind that comes from someone who respects your pain. And this became our new pattern. Not daily, but frequent enough that the boundary between relative and confidant thinned. The emotional distance between us shortened in increments. An inside joke here, a shared frustration there, a moment when our eyes held a second too long. Nothing physical happened, yet everything non-physical was happening. One night, when he was leaving, he stopped at the door. He didn't say anything inappropriate. He didn't touch me. He simply held the doorframe, looked back, and said, "You deserve someone who comes home to you. Not someone who just reports back to you." My throat tightened. I blinked away the sting behind my eyes. He left, and I stayed standing in that doorway, paralyzed by the realization that I was dangerously comforted by the attention of a man who wasn't mine. I had crossed a line without any contact, simply through the acceptance of validation from the wrong person. Infidelity doesn't begin with bodies. It begins with needing someone so badly that you forget who is allowed to fill that space. I was already too far gone. I just hadn't recognized the distance yet. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. A weekday so ordinary, it should have been forgettable. But the worst moments in life rarely arrive with warning signs. They disguise themselves as just another day, and then they rewrite everything. Aram had been away for nearly 2 weeks. My phone barely buzzed anymore. We had reached a point of polite, functional communication. Logistics, receipts, updates, nothing that resembled intimacy. I no longer waited for affection, I only waited for noise to fill the silence. That day, Hassan, an old friend from my university design department, was in the area. We had reconnected through social media recently. Just casual conversations, harmless nostalgia, two adults who once shared passion for creative work. He asked if he could stop by for 20 minutes so I could give feedback on a presentation design he was preparing for a pitch. I agreed because it felt harmless. Because I wanted to talk about real work again. Because I wanted to feel like a professional, not an abandoned spouse pacing through a big, empty house. Hassan arrived with his laptop and a box of pastries. He complimented the house, complimented my feedback, laughed at old memories, all safe, neutral, boring. But the atmosphere was different than it should have been. Too intimate for two people alone in a home where a husband was absent. I didn't acknowledge that discomfort, because acknowledging it meant accepting how fragile my moral ground had become. At one point, we moved to the bedroom because the sunlight was better there for reviewing color accuracy on his screen. The curtain was half drawn. The air was low and quiet. We sat on the edge of the bed to look at the laptop together. Not touching, not flirting, but close enough that the entire setup could be misread by anyone who walked in without context. And then the door clicked. I didn't even hear footsteps outside. I didn't hear the porch gate. Nothing. The door simply opened, and there he was, Saad, standing frozen in the doorway, holding a small bag of borrowed books. His expression was not shock mixed with immaturity, it was betrayal mixed with understanding. A 22-year-old adult witnessing something he should have never seen. His eyes did not move to Hassan's laptop. They moved only to me. Not a single word passed between us, but I felt judged in a language deeper than speech. Seconds stretched like slow torture. Hassan awkwardly cleared his throat and stood up. He muttered a polite greeting, clueless to the emotional explosion occurring right in front of him. Saad nodded stiffly, placed the books on a chair, and walked out. Not fast, not loud, just silently, as if noise would make the moment real. The front door closed with a softness more painful than a slam. Hassan left soon after. I stayed sitting at the foot of my bed, unable to move. My pulse was erratic. My body felt heavy, like guilt had taken physical shape and pressed itself into my skin. I knew in that instant. It wasn't what actually happened that would destroy me. It was what could be assumed. And assumptions are sometimes more lethal than truth. For the next 2 days, I lived inside a silent punishment I had created myself. Saad never messaged. He never called. And that absence hurt more than any confrontation could have. Silence is a verdict delivered without a judge. It is the kind of verdict you sentence yourself with. Every time my phone vibrated, I wished it was him. Every time it didn't, I feared what story he must have constructed in his mind. He had witnessed a moment without context, but the human mind rarely waits for context. It fills the blanks with the worst possible version. That same evening, Aram returned. Suitcase wheels rolling across the marble floor. The familiar scent of hotel laundry detergent. He kissed my forehead like a man who performs affection because he knows that is what husbands are supposed to do. He asked how I was. I said, fine. We exchanged a few generic words about flight delays, office politics, quarterly targets. All surface. No depth. I sat there thinking how strange it is that I had spent so much emotional energy caring about the opinion of someone who wasn't even mine, while the man who legally belonged to me felt like a polite stranger renting a room in my life. I wanted to tell Aram everything. I wanted to confess, not the action, but the feeling behind the action. The starvation, the neglect, the quiet suffering that made me vulnerable to attention that wasn't meant for me. But I realized something. He didn't have the emotional bandwidth to understand betrayal unless it came with physical proof. My emotional collapse would simply sound like drama to him. He was trained to dismiss anything that wasn't measurable, tangible, or reportable. And so the secret remained silent. Days passed. Saad stayed absent. I avoided family gatherings. I found excuses not to attend dinners. I feared seeing even the reflection of his disappointment. I blocked myself more effectively than anyone else could. Because guilt doesn't need witnesses. It grows internally. It expands inside your ribs like smoke filling an airtight room. I became paranoid. Every message notification made me think Saad had told someone. Every phone call from my sister felt like a ticking bomb. I began to monitor my own expressions, my own tone, my own footsteps, like someone waiting for exposure. Yet nothing happened. No accusation, no confrontation, no disaster, until I understood the real punishment, the fear itself. That is the true cost of infidelity, not the exposure, but the anxiety that you could be exposed at any moment. The erosion of self-respect. The way you start distrusting not others, but yourself. In the end, nobody found out. But I can never return to who I was before that door opened. Sometimes the worst consequences are not what the world does to you. They are what you do to your own self, when you realize how thin the line is between loneliness and self-destruction. And I crossed that line long before anyone caught me doing anything at all.